Have the difficult conversation. There's probably a conversation you already need, to have. You already need to know you have to have. Maybe it's with a partner, maybe it's with a family member, maybe it's with your boss, or it could be someone you work with, or maybe it's with yourself. You've probably replayed it in your head more than once. I know I've definitely done that. You know what you want to say, something needs to change, but every time the opportunity comes up, you tell yourself, now this isn't the right time. You make excuses. You don't want to make things awkward. They're already stressed out. Maybe it'll sort itself out. I'll bring it up next time. But next time when next time comes, you ultimately avoid it again. And I've done this more times than I'd like to admit. And what I'm starting to realize is that avoiding a difficult conversation doesn't remove the discomfort. It just spreads it out. Instead of having 10 minutes of uncomfortable conversation, you carry it for days, you carry it for weeks, and sometimes even months. You start to overthink every interaction. You start building resentment. You become distant, and the other person might not even understand why. So this video, I wanted to talk about something I'm learning myself, and it's how to stop waiting for the perfect moment and have the conversation you already know you need to have. Avoidance feels safer in the moment. The reason we avoid difficult conversations is pretty simple. We're scared of what happens or what might happen. We might hurt someone, they might get angry, they might reject what we're saying, they might misunderstand us. The relationship or the connection you have with someone will or may ultimately change, and you live in that hell. Or we might hear something that we don't want to hear and don't need to hear, and then you go through this cycle of overthinking and ruminating over what could happen, and then we stay quiet. I definitely done that before, and in the moment, staying quiet feels like the safer option. You keep the peace. That's something I've definitely done. You don't have to deal with the reaction. You don't have to deal with or you don't have to find the perfect words. You can pretend everything is fine just for a little bit longer. But avoiding conflict and creating peace are not always the same thing. Sometimes what looks like peace is actually silence with a bit of pain and tension underneath, and that's not peace. Nothing has been resolved. No one understands each other better. You've and I have ultimately just delayed the moment where the truth has to come out. And usually, the longer you wait, the harder the conversation becomes. Because you're not only talking about the original issue, you're also dealing with frustration, the assumptions, the resentment, the built-up, while no one has said anything. The conversation is usually in your own head, and the one in your own head is usually worse than what the reality is. I think one of the biggest traps is that we have the entire conversations in our head before we have it in real life. We predict what the other person is going to say. We imagine them being defensive. We imagine ourselves freezing or saying the wrong thing. We create argument. We lose the argument. We win the argument. Then we get angry at them for the conversation that hasn't even happened. I've definitely done that. I can work myself up over someone's imaginary reaction before I've even given them a chance to respond. And the problem is that once you've rehearsed the worst case scenario enough times, you start walking into the real conversation ready to fight and argue. You're not coming from a place of reason. You start to hear judgment where there might be only a little bit of confusion. You become defensive because before the other person has even disagreed with you or a chance to speak their opinion. Sometimes the person reacts exactly how you feared, but sometimes they surprise you. Sometimes they could be just as open and understanding to your situation. They might already know something is wrong, and generally, if that person is close to you and you're willing to have that hard conversation, they know something's wrong with you, whether consciously or not. They might have been waiting for you to bring it up. They might understand more than you expected. They might even be relieved that someone finally said it, and you can start to prepare that conversation or prepare for that conversation. But you can't complete it yourself. It's a two-way street, and at some point you have to stop speaking for the other person and let them actually be a part of it or take part of it. Difficult doesn't automatically mean aggressive. For a long time, I think I confused difficult conversations as confrontation. I thought that bringing something up meant creating conflict. Sometimes it can. That ultimately made me want to make a strong argument. I had to prove my point. I had to defend myself. I had to make the other person understand exactly why I'm right. And that's not the frame of mind that anyone needs to be in a difficult conversation. It doesn't have to be aggressive. It can be calm. It can be respectful. It can come from a genuine desire to improve the relationship rather than win the argument. For example, you can say, something has been bothering me and I don't want it to turn into resentment. I might not explain this perfectly, but I think it's important that I try. I care about the relationship, which is why I want to talk. That's a lot easier to say now than in the heat of the moment. Your emotions might be going, you're a bit anxious, you're a bit nervous, maybe you're excited, you get a bit angry, you want to be right, all these emotions. But I think if you come from an authentic and genuine place, those openings can change the energy of the conversation. You're not arriving with a weapon ready to fight. You're arriving with honesty and authenticity. It doesn't guarantee that the conversation is going to be easy, but it makes it clear that you're not here to attack the other person. You're there to deal with the issue. You should always say what happened, not who they are. One thing I'm trying to get better at is talking about the behavior without attacking the person's character. And it's a difficult skill, and it's something I'll continue to learn in my life. But there's a big difference between saying, you never care about what I think, and saying, when that decision was made without speaking to me, I felt like my opinion didn't matter. One statement tells someone who they are. The other statement explains what happened and how it affected you. When we say things like, you're selfish, you're lazy, you're impossible to talk to, you always do this, the other person usually stops listening. They don't hear anything else you say because now they're trying to defend their identity instead of the issue at hand. The conversation is no longer about solving the original problem. It becomes a debate about whether they are a bad person. That doesn't mean you have to soften everything so much that the point or the issue disappears. You can be direct. You can tell someone that their behavior hurt you. You can explain what needs to change. But being direct and being cruel are not the same thing. I'm trying to focus on three things: what happened, how it affected you, and what you need moving forward. I think that gives the conversation somewhere to go, somewhere to go, but a goal and objective about the conversation. And be honest about your part. A difficult conversation becomes much more productive when you're willing to acknowledge your own role. Maybe you didn't communicate clearly. Maybe you waited too long and allowed resentment to grow. Maybe you made assumptions. Maybe you acted badly or reacted badly to a situation. Maybe you expected the other person to know what you needed without ever telling them. That doesn't mean you take responsibility for everything. It doesn't mean excusing someone it doesn't mean excusing someone else's behavior. It just means being honest about the part that belongs to you. And you might say, I should have brought this up earlier. I know I've been distant, and instead of explaining myself or explaining what was wrong, I've just been distant. I could have handled things a little bit better. I realized I expected you to understand something I never properly communicated. Taking responsibility doesn't weaken your position. It usually makes the other person feel safer taking responsibility for theirs. It shows that the goal isn't to make them carry all the blame. The goal is to understand what happened and work out what happens next. And at the end of the day, you can't control their reaction. And this is the hardest part. It might even be the hardest part. You can choose your words carefully, you can speak your mind calmly, you can be honest, you can be responsible, you can give the other person space to respond, and they still might react badly. They might become defensive, they dismiss your feelings, they might turn it back on you, they might refuse to have any sort of conversation at all. That doesn't always mean you handled it incorrectly. Sometimes people are not ready to hear what you need to say. And part of having a difficult conversation is accepting that your job is to communicate honestly and respectfully. Your job is not to control the response as much as we want to. And that's difficult for me because I think through every single possible outcome. I want the exact combination of words to guarantee the... Alrighty, apologies, I had to cut the video there. My phone ran out of storage. But to continue on, I was saying I want to find the exact combination of words that guarantees the most success out of this conversation. But those words just don't exist. And you can create conditions for honest conversations. You can't guarantee the results. The success of the conversation isn't always that both people agree. Sometimes success is simply that you finally said what you need to. You gave the relationship a chance to improve. You gave the friendship a chance to improve. You gave the work relationship a chance to improve. You stopped abandoning your own needs just to avoid discomfort. Listen to understand, not just respond. Having a difficult conversation also means being prepared to hear something that is difficult in return, and it's an uncomfortable situation. You know, we often enter these conversations with a list of everything we want the other person to understand. We think a lot about what we want to say, but the other person may have their own experience of the situation, and they might tell you something that you did to hurt them. They might explain that they saw the situation completely different. They might point out something you had never even considered, and your immediate reaction might be to defend yourself. And I think that's normal. But ultimately, if both people are only waiting for their turn to speak, nothing gets resolved. Listening doesn't mean agreeing with everything. It means trying to understand what the situation felt like from the other person's side. Have an empathy and putting yourself in the other person's shoes. You can ask, what did that situation feel like for you? Is there something I'm missing? What do you need me to do to... What do you need me to understand? What could I have done differently? Those questions can completely change the conversation. Sometimes the thing you're arguing about isn't even the real issue. The real issue might be feeling ignored, unappreciated, disrespected, controlled, uh, undervalued, taken for granted, or been afraid. You often don't reach the real issue until both people stop trying to win. And a simple way to start, if you have the conversation you need to have, I think there are 4 things worth thinking about first. The first thing is, what is the actual issue? Try to explain it in 1 or 2 sentences, not every argument you've ever had, not everything the person has ever done wrong. What is the main thing that needs to be discussed? Second thing, what outcome do you want? Do you want an apology, a change in behavior, a clearer boundary, a decision? Or do you simply want to be heard? Knowing what you want in these difficult conversations can help avoid it becoming a long list of complaints. The third is, what part of this belongs to you? So some self-reflection here. What do you need to acknowledge? Something you could have communicated earlier, something you can take responsibility for, something you need to apologize for. And finally, what is the kindest, honest way to begin? Not the easiest, not the version that avoids the truth, but the kindest and honest version. It might be, I've been avoiding this because I care about you and I don't want this to become an argument. But I think not talking about it is making it worse, or making things worse. That one sentence can open the door. You don't need a perfect speech. You don't need to write it down. You just need to be truthful from the beginning. Some conversations will change relationships. There is also a reality we don't always want to admit. Some difficult conversations will change a relationship. You might discover that someone doesn't respect your boundaries. You might also realize that you want different things. You want to hear a truth that hurts, or you might not want to hear that truth. You might need to step away, but avoiding the conversation doesn't protect the relationship. It only protects the version of the relationship that exists in your imagination. A healthy relationship should be able to survive honestly. It might be uncomfortable. It will require compromise. It might take more than one conversation. It's not a one and done. But if the relationship only works when you stay silent, or ignore your needs, or pretend nothing is wrong, then the problem is already there. The conversation didn't create it. The conversation revealed it. The conversation with yourself, and sometimes the most difficult conversation, isn't with someone else. It's the one you need to have with yourself. Are you happy? Are you staying somewhere because you're afraid to leave? Are you blaming others for something you know you need to change? Are you avoiding a decision because you don't want to disappoint someone? Are you pretending something doesn't hurt because admitting it would make it real? We can lie to ourselves for such a long time. We call it being patient, being practical, keeping the peace, waiting for the right moment. But sometimes we already know the truth. We just didn't like what the truth is asking us to do. And maybe the difficult conversation is simply admitting, this isn't working. I'm not okay with this. I need help. I need to change. I deserve better than what I'm currently accepting. That conversation can be very painful. And boy, I've been there. But it can also be the beginning, and usually is the beginning of something much healthier. Look, difficult conversations are difficult because it's something meaningful is at risk. Something meaningful is at risk. A relationship, a job, a partnership, a friendship, a sense of safety, a comfort zone you've built for yourself. The way someone sees you, but something is also at risk when you stay quiet. The trust, the connection, the self-respect, and the possibility of actually fixing the problem. You don't need to be fearless before you speak. You don't need the perfect words. You don't need to know exactly how the other person will respond. You just need to decide that temporary discomfort of honesty is better than long-term damage of avoidance. So think about the conversation you've been putting off, because I've definitely had many conversations that I like to put off, and sometimes driving straight into them is terribly uncomfortable, and not only until after a couple of days I'll feel somewhat better about myself, and I may not, but I'm glad I did it. Work out what you need to say, choose a respectful time, speak honestly, listen properly, and I accept that you can control how you show up, but you can't control everything. Can't control everything that happens afterwards. You can't control the reaction, the response. Control the controllable. And I think all you have to do is start to have that conversation. Not because it will definitely go perfectly, but because you deserve a relationship, a partnership, a situation, and a life where the truth has somewhere to exist. Thank you for watching.